This has been one hell of a month, and I'm sorry to see Bill go, but we are definitely going to be talking about coming back. Last week, I compared our guest facilitator to CNN's James Carville, and I had a few people who've come up to me during the week and said, "Hey, I just looked up that guy James Carville, and you're right. He sounds like him, and he even looks just like him." So I give you AA's version of CNN's James Carville. Here is Bill Cleveland.
I was unmuting. You keep muting me back again.
Sorry about that.
Just saying, I'm not James Carville. He's a Southern boy. I think he's from Louisiana.
Yeah.
Um, so resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Here's a great line. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That's AA, isn't it? I think that's the approach. That's what it addresses. We're not good doctors, we're not good physical trainers, but we're pretty good spiritual characters, spiritual weirdos. And in dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. Boy, that's us, isn't it? So we talked last week about doing an inventory, and what we're looking for is what isn't moving in the stock, what's not moving. We're not looking for the good stuff. We're looking for the stuff that isn't serving us well. And if you've been around Alcoholics Anonymous long enough, for a period of time, you become very aware of the fact that resentment is the number one killer of us. How many of us have known somebody in AA that got really pissed off about something and just exploded into a relapse? Oh. I got a guy right now that's been trying to get sober a couple of different times. He's sending me nasty emails. And this morning he sent me an especially nasty one, telling me I should take the cotton out of my ears and put it in my mouth or something like that. And I found my hands up over the top of the keyboard, getting ready to lash out. And I just deleted it. I think that's spiritual growth, right? And my sponsor likes to say people hesitate over the inventory. They think it's difficult. They think it's hard. No, it's not. We know who those people are that we're pissed off at. That's our story, isn't it? How does the alcoholic life seem like the only normal one? It has to be someone else's fault. You can't be an alcoholic and not know who they are. So these people and institutions are floating around in our head every night as we go to bed. You ever hated somebody really good, and then you forget to hate him on a certain day, and then the following day you got to hate him extra to make up for the day you skipped? That's certainly me. Maybe less so today, but when I got here, I know who they were. Ralph gave a talk Saturday night here locally. Karen and I went to hear him. And one of the things he mentioned that I've been thinking about ever since, and this is an aspect of that, is that all of us get here with a certain skill set. There's some things we can do and some things we're not good at. And if you're a good writer and you're a poet or something, you can sit and write stuff down. That's pretty easy to do. And with me, I had, by the time I got to AA, I'd been to a lot of therapy, been to mental institutions, and I absolutely love talking about myself. It's my favorite subject. And in therapy, if we run out of things to talk about, I'll just make stuff up to continue the conversation. I'm a communicator. I'm an extrovert. I'm that guy. I want to be in the meeting. I would prefer to be the secretary or the speaker. I don't want to be just sitting in the audience like everybody else. That's me. That's my strong suit. It is what is the negative aspect of my nature and also the positive aspect. Because I'll do stuff. I'll just do stuff. I'll just do things. Well, I'll do it, and get out of my way. Here I go. It's that kind of a thing, but some people don't have that. Some people don't, and what Ralph mentioned, which I really heard because I know this is true. People many times aren't doing the work because they don't want to or they're lazy. They just can't. They just can't. They're just not there. It doesn't come to them. It isn't natural. It isn't, it isn't a matter of just applying yourself. They're not being resistant. They just don't have it. And I get that. And the inventory is the first step in that direction. Now, we can cogitate about the first step in powerlessness, and we can discuss concepts of God and the second, I don't believe or I do believe. We can actually say the prayer. We can say the third step prayer and not mean it at all, but they tell us to do it, so we'll do it. I'll hold hands with you and we'll say the prayer. Now we're asking you to actually do something to further your program, to start healing. We're asking you to write some stuff down. And the first thing we want you to write down is the people you hate, the people that put you here. I was on a 12-step call one time, and I brought this guy. It was early in the morning. I'd been up all night with him, and I brought him to the Alano Club early in the morning, get him some coffee, and we're sitting at a little picnic bench in there. And this old timer, Rich Miller, he's passed away now, but he had a lot of time. And I called Rich over to introduce him to the new guy. And Rich leans over and shakes his hand, and he says, you know why we're sober? And the guy says, no. And he says, to take revenge on the sons of bitches that sent us here. And I thought, dude, I'm so glad I introduced the new guy to you, man. It's like, oh, man. Man. So what we're looking for is we're looking for what isn't moving, for what is causing us to stay in this negative life we're in. And I think one of the primary things of that is that rage, that anger. And what it is, it's the story that we tell. Silkworth says in the doctor's opinion, the alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. How the hell do we pull that off? How do we rationalize and justify our behavior? Well, it has to be someone else's fault. So we're asking you to list that. Who are you angry at? We can write a name down, and then we give a brief description of why we're angry. What happened? What is it? Why are you angry? Well, this guy beat me up with a 2x4. And the third column is, how were you affected by that? Well, shit, I ended up in the hospital, and it scared the hell out of me, and it hurt me physically. I was hurt. Made me really insecure every time I walk down the street. Now I look over my shoulder. There's a lot of impact on that. Then the last column is, what were your faults and mistakes? Some people like to say, what was my part? Sometimes there certainly is a part. But what were your faults and mistakes? Well, I was sleeping with his wife. Oh, well, there you go. Sometimes it's that obvious. There were some resentments on my resentment. It was that obvious. Why that happened to me is because I had done something. In other cases, maybe not, If something happened to you as a child, maybe you were molested. That's a common thing you run into. growing up in alcoholic homes, that's something that happens. What part did you play? I don't think a kid played any part. I think they truly are an innocent victim. There's just no getting around that. Sometimes that's a justifiable thing. I was a victim. I didn't play a part. But if you're 40 years old and you're still hanging on to that, then you're unforgiving. It's become an aspect of your nature. And the idea is to rid yourself of this resentment, because the perpetrators, the people you're angry, they don't feel your anger. I remember being told that, and I thought, I think they kind of do. Don't you think that? You kind of, if I hate them really good, you kind of don't want to give up the anger. It's part of my personality. It's part of who I am. I hated my father. I really hated him. He didn't like me much either. I mean, I was a rotten kid. It was a shared experience. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. And it was kind of the engine, the fire that drove my life for many years. That anger, that horrible anger I had towards my father. He was on the top of the list. And it's a pretty good list. And he was right up there at the top, that I do not like my father. And I listed the reasons why. And I really looked at how it affected me. It affected every aspect of it. It was a four-bagger, man. That's a in the park home run. It's everything. It affects everything. And I knew that I had to make amends. I knew that I had to be rid of this. By this time, I hadn't been around sober very long, but I was almost 40 years old, and I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. Like when you take away the medication, it's hard to maintain the justification for the negative aspects of your nature, I think, isn't it? It's hard to let go of it, but you can certainly see it. I may be screwed up, but I'm not stupid. I get it. I'm reading the book and I'm writing this inventory out and I'm talking to my sponsor. He's sharing experiences with me. I realize now that I'm not alone, that these feelings I have are very commonplace. My resentments weren't anything exceptional, and my transgressions, my evil behavior, you guys put me to shame, man. I thought, geez, I should have tried harder, So by this time, I'm feeling like part of what's going on. I'm doing the inventory. And when you do the inventory, that's when you really join Alcoholics Anonymous. When you write some stuff down, we got you now. It's going to be hard to go backwards now. You're starting to write it down. If you're writing it down, you're starting to get it, And on my father's 70th birthday, and I don't think I was a year sober yet. I went up to the house, and this is a man that had gotten sober in 1954. So he was sober. I got raised in AA, which I don't recommend. It's like it's difficult, especially when you're drinking. And so I took him in. I said, I need to talk to you before we go. And I said, come with me in this other room. And I was taking him in the other room. And he says, well, you don't need to do this. And I said, you better than anybody know that I do. Get in the room. And I sat down and I told him, I was my sponsor. I said, what am I going to say? I think he owes me. I'm not really feeling, I know, I get it. I got to do it. But what am I going to say to him? And Jay said, well, you don't have to list all the transgressions. He was there. He knows what happened. You were stealing his cars. One time I stole the TV set out of their house. He came and found me and took it back. I thought that was pretty ballsy. When your dad knocks on the dope den that you're living in and says, I want my TV back, you remember that experience, And, but what I said to him is, I'm sorry that I wasn't the son that I know that you wanted me to be. And I meant that. I knew I was a bad kid. It's hard to justify some of the things I did. And we talked a little bit. And what happened is I went out in the car. My wife at the time was with me. And we're sitting in the car, and I started crying in the car. I started sobbing, and I couldn't stop. I had a physical reaction. When the spiritual is addressed, the mental and the physical follows. It was like something reached out and just pulled all that rage out of me. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. I will never forget that experience of doing that. And it starts with the inventory. Now, my first inventory I did a fifth step when I was 6 months sober. And I still have that inventory. And every once in a while I pull it out and I look at it, and it was pretty good. Was it thorough? No. I didn't know enough to be thorough. I hadn't been around long enough to really look at my life in some sort of an introspective way as an observer and really look at it and write some stuff down. The one I did at 10 years sober was really good. I knew some stuff then, and I did one here recently about not quite a year ago, I think. And I didn't have any resentments to list. Is that possible? I thought I was lying to myself. There's got to be something. And a good definition that I really like for resentment is something that I don't like that I think should be different than it is. There's lots of things I don't like. There's certain foods I don't like. I just don't eat them. There's politicians I don't like, so I turn off the news. It's like, but I don't expect them to be different than they are. A resentment is something you don't like that you think should be different. That in order for you to be okay, that thing outside yourself needs to be different. And how's that working for you? I mean, when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but isn't that the way we behave? She needs to be different. The reason I'm angry is because of the way she is. She's responsible for how I feel and for how I behave. I don't believe that anymore. But I can look back and see that's how I behaved. And I just don't get that I'm powerless. I think you need to be different in order for our relationship to be better. And that's not true. I either need to accept you the way you are or move on. But to stick around in a relationship and try to force somebody to be different so that you'll be happy, that's a really good definition of insanity. And I've lived a lot of my life that way. And so with that experience with my father, and then 10 years later making another, and recently this other inventory, what I wrote down for my resentments is aspects of my nature that I don't care for. Ways that I think I should be different. And I think I'm as powerless over myself as I am over you. But at least if I have enough self-awareness, I can see what it is that I do that causes me trouble in my life. That I am the source of all the chaos in my life. And that doesn't mean that you're innocent. But should I choose to engage? That's on me. I have to be responsible for my emotional state and for my behavior. Not you. You're not responsible. I'm responsible for that. Should I choose to engage? And that first inventory that we do is opening that door. And that fourth column of that resentment list essentially is the list of our key defects of character. That's where we start making the list of 6 and 7. Here it is. I retaliate. I argue. I push. I coerce. I manipulate. I gossip. Just to help you, of course. Me and some of your fellows are talking about you because we know that you want to be better than you are, but I gossip, At 10 years sober, I went to an Al-Anon meeting. My dad didn't want me to go to Al-Anon. He goes, that's just for guys that are looking for girls, right? And it's an old school attitude. And he loved Al-Anon, but he just didn't think alcoholics belonged in Al-Anon. But some of my friends were going, so I went to a literature study, an Al-Anon meeting at the Hermoso Lano Club. Used to be on Sunday night, and they studied literature, and they would take one of the Al-Anons there would take a piece of literature home, read it over the week, and then come back and give a little share on that piece of literature. And one of them, they have great literature in Al-Anon. Let me tell you, it'll make you uncomfortable. And one of them was gossip, it was a pamphlet on gossip. And this one woman said, evidently my life is so boring, I find it necessary to talk about yours. And just the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I mean, you know, I'm a men's stag guy. We can we can keep up with anybody. We're perfectly capable of doing some really good gossip, you know, and then we'll look at each other. And I'll tell you, if you surround yourself with some healthy people in AA, they will stop you from doing that. You know, there's always somebody that'll stand there in the middle of a good gossip section where we're just eviscerating some bastard that none of us like, right? And somebody will say, you know, we need to stop doing this. This is childish. High school's over, boys. And then the rest of us are all feeling guilty. Now we're going to gossip about that guy that just said that to us, you know? Who the hell does he see? Some spiritual giant? I just saw him last week smoking pot down on the beach. What do you think, you know? Character defects. This is when we start really looking at them. You know, we're looking for the immovable parts of the inventory. Here it is. It's about me. It isn't the other people. It isn't the situations. It's about my reaction to life. How is it that how do I get along? What are my motivations? How do I behave? And at 40 years sober almost, my friends keep telling me, you're not there yet, Bill. It's not going to be till March, you know, and you're looking pretty shaky to me. And but 40 years later, I'm writing down aspects of my nature that I don't care for, that I wish was different. And then the other thing, the more radical thing that I do with that, then this is really radical. I pray and ask for them to be removed. And at this point in my life, I really mean it. I'm really, really done with it, you know? And I believe when I pray with sincerity, a real sincerity, a genuine sincerity, you know, one thing that helps me do that is I pray out loud so I can hear myself, what I say, not be in secret anymore. You know, please help me not make this about me. Please, please remove the bondage of self. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty much sick to death of myself, you know? I find you a lot more interesting than I find myself, you know? It's just more interesting listening to you than it is listening to the chatter that goes on in my head. I've got a problem with my hip now. I had to cancel a couple of engagements. And where do you go with that? When you're 77 years old and your hip starts going out, I'm going to be dead in about a year or two, I'm pretty sure. This is the beginning of the end. It goes there. Doesn't your head do that shit? That's what happens to me. I just go right down the rabbit, right down the drain. I'm sitting in my backyard yesterday feeling this in my beautiful home that I live in with my wife who kind of likes me. You know, I got a really hot wife. I lucked out, man. This chick is just really great. And she's sober. We share the same path together. You know, financially, I'm doing fairly well. I'm okay. Things have worked out. You know, I'm not super rich, but I got fart money. I got a little bit of money. I'm okay. You know, retirement's looking good. And I'm sitting in my ashram, my beautiful ashram, smoking one of my really nice cigars, whining about the state of my life. At some point, you just have to burst out laughing. It's just ridiculous. And at that point, I will say a prayer and ask, please remove this from me. You know, sit down and write a gratitude list. You know, I tell guys, write a gratitude list. Do I do one? Oh, hell no. You know, I'm a phony. I'm a bullshitter. You know, I mean, I give great advice though. I give really great advice. And every once in a while, in a weak moment, I'll actually take my own advice and write down 10 things that I'm really, really grateful for. Now, recently, not too long ago, I did that. And two of the people that are on that list are guys that have worked for me for many years in a little company that I have. And they've done the whole time I was having a liver transplant. I never worried that these guys have been with me a long time. And I wrote these 10 people down, mostly people, and I wrote their 2 names. And I called my sponsor and I said, Jay, I wrote a gratitude list. And he went, what? You what? I said, yeah, I wrote it down. I gave somebody some advice and I told them if they do it, I'll do it too. So I wrote down this list. I was very proud of myself and I read in my list. And then he said, here's what I want you to do. And I go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I just want credit for writing the list. I don't want an assignment. You know, I give assignments. I don't take them. Right. And he goes, and he interrupted me as he has done for 39 years. And he says, I want you to go to those people on the list and tell them that they're on your list. I want you to do that. So one day I went down to the shop to my work and these 2 guys are there. And one guy was in my office and I told him, I said, hey, Don, I want you to know that I wrote out a gratitude list of things that I'm grateful for and that you're on that list. And you're more than certainly an employee. You know, I feel very close to you. And I never worried about this place when I was so sick in the hospital because I knew you were here. And I want you to know how grateful I am. And he looked at me and he got choked up and he came over and nuzzled me. I remember standing in my office. This guy's worked for me for like 30 years, right? Standing in my office and I'm kind of holding him thinking, I'm so glad I did this. You know, it's like, so Willie, the guy out that runs all the manufacturing in the place, this guy's been with me for over 40 years. I hired him when he was 18. I think he wasn't even 18. I think he lied. He's worked for me for a long, long time. Excellent guy. And I said, Willie, I want you to know that you're on my gratitude list. I made this list and you're on it. And he cried. And he came over and put his arms around me and just held me in the middle of the shop office. You know, that's when you're looking around and go, whoa, hope nobody's looking right now. You know? And I'm so glad that I did that. And I sit out yesterday in my little ashram and whine about the state of my life, you know. So I can tell you this, if you do an inventory, it's the beginning of the end of letting go of all this shit that has plagued you all your life. And I can also tell you that it doesn't end there after that first one. There'll be more. And every time somebody comes to you and you listen to their inventory, you know you have an answer for them. You know, that when somebody does that inventory, they're now in the club. If they make amends, they may become one of your best friends. If they start sponsoring people, now you're peers, now you're equals. And the sponsor-sponsee thing diminishes, and now you're on the same team. I've really enjoyed doing this last month. Thanks so much for having me. This has really been fun. Thank you all.